Dude, why didn't I ever think of this before? Because, like, trying to sit forward the whole time? Fucking dumb.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Jeff and Collin in the Morning, where we are your hosts, Collin Peters.
And Jeff Manfred.
Jeff, you have, I guess you would say, a love letter for this episode today?
Absolutely.
You were so pumped about talking about this topic, and why don't you introduce the topic and where your heart is with this and why it was brought to our attention?
Well, the original idea for this episode was because I wanted to figure out whether or not horror hosts had relevance in this era, where everyone knows, like, you've heard me talk about several times Joe Bob and Mr. Science and Elvira. It's like, it's a staple point in history that's never going to go away. Because to me, I feel like it has a lot of relevance now, where before this whole show happened, I texted this over to Collin and we're having a discussion while I'm working out whether or not horror hosts have relevance. But as we were looking into it, I started realizing I might have a better point on it because it's not more or less like a general population is going to tell you no, where fans like myself are always going to tell you yes. Because we're looking at it through, I want to say, rose-colored glasses, because we know what we're looking for. Where general public is just like, well, you got people just making fun of movies?
Yeah, that's one way to describe it. I think it's also a good educational tool. Like, sometimes it adds a little more validity to the movie. Maybe not validity is the right word, but definitely a little more entertainment value. Like, I know you're big in the Mystery Science Theater 3000, and they're pretty good at hosting bad movies and making, like, what is so unbearable to watch more entertaining because they just add this commentary to add some jokes and a little more flavor to something that's just so bad that you can't stand to go, okay, this is some humor and interjected in with here to makes it a little bit more fun. So I guess it all depends on your taste in movies, if you can stomach through the bad for a little bit of comedy, and it also depends on how the comedy is, and even, I know, like, your personal favorite of yours and very cool guy is Joe Bob Briggs. You know, he likes to put a lot of history and backstory into, like, behind the scenes type stuff, I mean, into what goes in this particular movie, and then he adds a little fun, like the body counts and horror films and things like that. Really cool stuff.
And honestly, that's what made me fall in love with him, was because instead of looking at my phone for a lot of the stuff that I'm gonna look at anyway, you're having him tell you. And I'm like sitting there going, so I'm getting the trivia as the movie is going on. So I was like, yeah, you get your drive-in total, so you get boob count, you get blood, you get killing, you find out crazy ways. So like he always ends it with like, if someone gets killed by a chainsaw, it's chainsaw foo. So it's stuff like that. Like he puts his humor into it, and then it's like you get a little bit of a rant from him. So it's like kind of cool seeing like someone else bitch about a movie, even if it's that bad. And then every now and again you'll get a guest who was in the movie. So like with Chopping Mall, he had Kelly Maroney, and I think it was Castle Freak, it was Barbara Crampton. So it's kind of cool seeing that stuff too. So he actually yesterday I was listening to their latest episode, and he was talking about how some guests get very not uncomfortable, almost uneasy doing the show, only because like they don't know what to talk about, because like now you're put on the spot, and they're like, he's like, before the show starts, he's like, all right, you can either just talk about whatever you want about the movie, or he goes, A, B, C, you can just talk about these 3 talking points. He goes, every now and again you get one that somebody has an agenda. And he goes, I'll try to steer away from it because it becomes too political, but he goes, most of the time you can't get away from it.
And for anybody who listens to us, like, we try to keep politics out of it. We just want to be entertainment, and which is, you know, what we want to do, because politics just ruin everything anyway. I think entertainment media should be strictly for entertainment media, and that's just the way it should be. I mean, putting a positive message isn't a bad thing, but when you get so one-sided on something, you know, like, even if you think it's right, it could be wrong in the wrong person's eye, or it could be wrong in general. You know, like somebody, as extreme as it might be, this is like a very extreme example. Somebody might say, "Oh, it's okay to kill kids," and it's like,
Fuck no.
no, yeah, no, no, dude, it's not good to kill anybody. You know, it's like, well, I think it's okay, so I'm gonna put it in my movie, and it's like,
Get the fuck out of here.
exactly. It's like, no. So, like, yeah, don't, like, stay away from that. I mean, it's one thing to, like, use it as a scene to, like, change somebody, like, the character, or to build an impact. Like, I think in Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, you know, like, there was a scene where the horseman killed the little kid, but it was off camera, and some people said, well, I don't know, and it's like, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And I'm kind of glad they didn't show it.
Yeah, exactly. I think what they did was really tasteful, and it really made you go, this guy's a piece of shit. But, I mean, it's this dead ghost, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, what are you going to do about it?
You've got no empathy.
But it just goes to show that, like, what you're dealing with is just, like, a cold-hearted, you know, soulless, hell-bound, you know, asshole. But no, I appreciate that he says, like, here's your talking points, but I just want to hear more about the movie. Like, when you're there listening to this stuff, you want to hear about the movie. You want to talk politics, go on the fucking news. That's how I view it. But I also like how some of these people, they start talking a little bit more behind the scenes type stuff, where they say things that maybe weren't in a documentary or were recorded and they didn't make it. But sometimes I've also noticed that some directors or actors, they also like to...
Actually, it's a doorbell. What the fuck is ringing the doorbell?
Maybe it's the window people. Oh gosh, don't even worry about it.
It's a guy for the neighbor, and they thought that this was the house. Scully's getting aggressive.
Maybe the GPS didn't read it right.
That's what he said. The GPS told him to come here, and it's literally right next door.
Well, that kind of happened to me yesterday. I went to a financial advisor. I started a Roth IRA and made a couple investments.
Yeah.
And the building I went to was their old building.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, it's like on Meridian Boulevard and Broadcasting Square.
Yeah.
And then they moved to another building, and then on top of it, they changed names because they got bought out. So I'm looking for the signs, like, where is Waddle and Reed? And they said, yeah, we changed their name, and I'm like, well, that's why I couldn't see the fucking sign.
Why did they tell you when you?
I know.
Fucking dicks.
Oh, I forget where we were at now.
Fuck me, until I forgot. Oh, talking about how they were talking about stuff that's not in documentaries and.
Oh yeah. But going back to the directors or actors, when they talk about how there are things in documentaries that they didn't say or were cut from previous, interviews, I think it's cool that they go back in these new, like, horror host kind of environments and they say things like, well, this happened on set, or I couldn't talk about it then, but I can talk about it now. And sometimes, though, they do change their stories.
I think it comes with comes with time, because if you think about it, if they said something, let's say 10 years ago, and they go back and like start like looking into it, maybe they did mix something up over time, or literally their opinion on something changed.
Or maybe sometimes in a documentary, depending on who the people are, they'll take something and say, like Wes Craven, for example, he talked about how Freddy Krueger's glove was, like he said, I think one time I saw a cat do this, and I think that's where it came from. But in a couple interviews, he talked about what's the earliest form of a weapon, and he thought of a cave bear and the claw being that like thing that can come and reach around you, and the long fingernails, and that was more of motivation. I heard him say that multiple times, and I heard one interview where he talked about a cat, and maybe they just took that segment about the cat and put it in whatever documentary that they were doing at that time and said, oh, this sounds better. Or maybe it was also, he was saying like this was the influence for the posing that he gave Robert Englund, but they just made it seem like it was.
Coincidence?
Wow.
Sorry.
That's all right. But maybe the cat thing made it seem like it was more for influence for Robert Englund's posing. Yeah. And they just, like I said, interjected it as, oh, this was the influence. And he's like, no. So I'm going to say it again and again and again and again. Or how Heather Langenkamp will say that the sticky stairs, where she keeps on saying it was mushroom soup, but Jim Doyle, the creative effects guy, I think that's what he is, his title, he said that it was Bisquick just sitting overnight because it gets gooey, yeah, and that he said that's what it really was. So I thought that was pretty wild, and I like how they interject more people, or if Joe Bob or somebody, whoever else, gets more tidbit type stuff and actually gets it from the source, even though sometimes the source isn't always right either. Or when you ask actors, then they say, I don't know, I just kind of worked on the movie.
I feel like that's the most frustrating, because they're like, oh yeah, I'm working on the movie, but it's like you didn't know what was going on.
It's like one actor I met who did a bunch of really cool stuff with his career, and I asked him about in particular things, and all he just said was, oh, it was fucking awesome. Like, okay, well, how? I'm like curious to know. And I was like, maybe this is why we don't hear about you or see you in interviews and a bunch of stuff so much. So I was like, eh.
Yeah, so it's kind of, a bummer.
A little let down, yeah. I was like, okay, well, nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Later. But, excuse me. But like all things, this has a start. And it all started, believe it or not, back in 1816. Lord Byron, I don't really know what he was a lord of. I'm sorry I didn't look that up. I was just kind of doing like a real quick horror host history lesson here. But apparently Lord Byron, look him up if you're really curious about it. He challenged his companions at Lake Geneva to come up and tell these scary stories. And supposedly during this time, this is where you got characters like Frankenstein and the modern day vampire that we know of. And that's how the scary stories from the campfires and things like that kind of originated from. And this was one of the earliest recorded forms of horror hosts.
Oh, that's really cool.
I mean, take your pick if you feel like that is, or if anybody has any other information on that, please feel free to let us know. But that is what I found out to be the earliest form. And then we got our very first recorded horror host, which was Mila Nurmi, and she was known for being Vampira. She was basically Morticia Addams before Morticia Addams, and supposedly Morticia Addams did not have a name until the Addams Family show. And Vampira was this, she looked like a vampire with the black dress, black hair. We'll get into another character that was sort of emulated off of her when we get to that time frame. But
her career, even though she made such an impact, she actually had a very short-lived career.
It was only a year, yeah. I believe her show ran from April 30th, 1954 to April 2nd, 1955. And I think all she did was just introduce movies. Yeah. I don't know if she really was in commercial breaks or if they cut anything, but it was an ABC show, and I think she actually owned the character. Myra Nurmi did, Vampira, and when ABC wanted to buy the character from her, she refused, and ABC just canceled it.
Wow, that is harsh.
So they were like, all right, screw you. And then we got into the 1950s, 1957, I should say, and Universal Studios started building their own catalog of horror movies. Either they were buying older horror films or they were starting their own, especially with the Universal monster movies, and they wanted to come up with this thing called shock theater and wanted to air and show the older films. So what they did was they created this idea that there were going to be these horror hosts. Most famously was John Zachary, and he used comedy and cutaway gags. He was more horror host, I guess, that we know that really started it. Even though, like I said, I don't know if Vampira was just introducing the movie and maybe cutting it out, but it looked like John Zachary was definitely beginning of the movie, commercial cut, and put little humor in here and there. I don't know if he did trivia. It just seemed more like little comedy gags and stuff.
And he said it was more of an outlet because of going and being, was he a weatherman or some sort of announcer, and then playing two different characters. So being straight-laced and then being Zachary the monster, he actually was able to have a really good career because of it.
That's what he's known for.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea what else he's known for other than being the horror host. But
honestly, that laugh is what always gets me every time.
And 1950s was the rise of the shock theater. That was this big deal. I mean, besides Zachary, you had a bunch of other ones that came and went, but none of them really stuck out more than Zachary did. I'm trying to see if I have... No, I think like during the 50s was like really the birth of the horror host thing. I think more modern day televisions were picking up from the sound of things, and that's why it was easier to just kind of project these, certain characters. And obviously it was geared towards adults, and maybe like them as kids had seen some of these movies like The Wolfman and Frankenstein, and so it carried over, and for them to play them on TV, which was a big deal because everything was still theater.
Yeah.
There was no VHS or any sort of home device where you could get these movies. It was just, oh wow, it's on TV again. They didn't have anything like we do now where you could just pick the movie up or go on Netflix or whatever other streaming service and just be like, oh hey, here's this classic. I remember this when I was a kid. Exactly. So I'm sure it was a thrill for them. And then we also had another horror host that was emerging in the late 50s, maybe even the 60s. Was Rod Serling for The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
And that was a different form of horror hosting, because it wasn't really hosting the old movies. It was telling a new series of stories, whether it was... I've watched a couple Twilight Zone episodes. I never actually sat down and watched the whole series, but it was kind of like short films. I don't know if it was two different stories being told in an hour or if it was just one thing, but Rod Serling would come in and say that, this is what's going on in this Twilight Zone, let's see how it plays out kind of thing. And it wasn't really horror, it was just kind of like it could be. I mean, it was like sci-fi horror. Some things would be weird, they would take off into other planets or be like future dystopia type stuff, or almost like psychological thrillers, I think. Some things were pretty wild with it, I remember. I just never got into Twilight Zone or bothered to really give it the time of day. Maybe I should. I don't know.
It's actually pretty good. Like, it's more or less his narration, and then it leads into the episode, and then he finishes out the episode with kind of like, well, this is what happens over blah blah blah. But it's kind of cool. Like, his voice is very distinct, so as soon as you hear it, it's...
Oh, yeah. I remember that the most. Oh, hey, today in the Twilight Zone. I remember that. And then I think Disney has something called the Haunted Elevator or something.
Oh, really? I didn't even think about looking at Disney, because I'm like, when I think horror host, I don't think of Disney being it, but I know they have stuff there.
Well, I remember it specifically because I was down there, or it was Disney or MGM Studios. They have that side theme park, kind of like how Universal has Islands of Adventure.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like, Tower of Terror or a Haunted Elevator or something. And it was Twilight Zone based, I think. And it took you, like, you were in a hotel, and it kind of like took you through all this weird, wild stuff. And when you get ready to hop on the elevator, you get this clip of Rod Sterling talking about Twilight Zone and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is Twilight Zone related?
That's actually pretty cool, though.
It's been years, obviously, but I remember that was like what really stuck out and was more of like probably the biggest Twilight Zone thing that I can remember before even seeing an episode of it at all. And I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we had that, and then we also had another pretty famous horror host. His name was Svengoolie. There were actually two Svengoolies, I believe. One was originally Rich Cause, and wait, sorry. There was a man by the name of Jerry G. Bishop, and he was the original Svengoolie. And then you had another man called Rich Cause who took over for Jerry. And Jerry, I believe, originally was considered the son of Svengoolie from 1979 to 1986. And then when the show came back in 1995, I think Jerry Bishop was still around and said to him, hey, you should drop the name Son of Svengoolie and just go as Svengoolie.
Yeah. And then, actually, one other big one they had was Ghoulardi. He was out of Ohio. That was also in the 60s. So you had a big boom in the 60s of horror hosts.
Mona Lisa, I remember that was another one, and another guy named Sammy Terry.
Yeah, I'm looking right now, because some of the names alone were what made me laugh. Because, like, you had Chili Billy, you had Coffin Joe, and most of them were like the weatherman or announcers, and this was their side hustle, I guess would be. And then most of them got more popular because of it. Because, dude, at 11 o'clock at night, that's where a lot of the fun stuff happened around the 50s and 60s.
Absolutely. Well, you remember we would stay up late as kids and watch the late night shows, creature features. Hell, even Nick at Night had like the old classic TV shows, and some of them were better than what we were growing up with yet. So it was like, man, why do they save the good stuff for at night? Well, then Cartoon Network had Adult Swim, which were almost like, I wouldn't say like totally adult, like it doesn't really mean like it's X-rated or like super swearing. It's almost like more South Park content, throughout the course of that night. A
lot more adult, where they're able to get away with more. Like, the one that always sticks out to me is always going to be Metalocalypse, because of how ridiculous it is with the violence and the...
Robot Chicken.
Yeah. But it was cool. Like, Ghoulardi was another one that actually got really popular, but he was making fun of, I want to say, Cleveland. It kind of sticks out, yeah, because he was from Cleveland, so he made fun of Cleveland, and he got popular because of it. And he went for several years, and then he just got a better job, and he kind of left it behind. And then over time, he actually had, I think it was called, another person was trying to pick it up as Ghoulardi, so it became just the Ghoul. And same look, but different, like, I think he had like an eye patch and stuff, kind of like added on, and then he had one that was the Son of Ghoul. So it's kind of like people were trying to keep it going with a new name. But it was funny, he was saying that when he was doing the announcing work, totally different attitude, and he was afraid he wasn't able to get away with anything. But as soon as he put the costume on, he would say whatever he wanted and got away with it.
It's easier to disguise yourself
Yeah.
and just be like, oh, hey, remember this was like this guy? Like, wait, that's the local weatherman, you know?
And it was like this really bad pasted goatee, like really long, crazy hair, and then he's another one that had a really distinct voice. I can't even mimic it. It was just. I think there's even a deli named after him in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called Goulardi's Deli.
I definitely heard the name Goulardi's before. Never really put two and two together. Like, oh, hey, maybe it was this guy or looking into it. Thought it was just some random dude's name.
It could be like the sound of it doesn't sound like horror host. It sounds more.
Sounds more like an Italian restaurant. Oh, Goulardi's. Like, oh, okay. Do they have chicken parm there?
More than likely.
Yeah. So now we get to the 80s, which, let's face it, I mean, we probably got the biggest, most famous horror host 80s icon, and still relevant to this day, is Cassandra Peterson as Elvira.
Actually, we got 3 during the 80s.
Oh, really?
So it was the start of Elvira, the start of Mystery Science, and the start of Joe Bob.
No kidding.
Those are the 3 that stayed and are very current. Also, during that time, Freddy Krueger was a horror host with
That's true.
his show.
Freddy's Nightmares, yes.
I was like, I'm looking through this real quick. And it's kind of crazy seeing the amount going from 1950 to 1980. The numbers almost doubled, actually tripled. Because even the 70s, you had a little bit of a jump, and then the 80s, you had a big jump.
Well, more TVs, more popularity, I'd say that probably helped out a lot. I think even Cassandra Peterson as Elvira was more, what was she, NBC?
I think so.
I think she was more major network. Let's see. Apparently they tried to revive the show Fright Night. Obviously we know the movie more with the Roddy McDowall about the vampire with Chris Sarandon, but there was a show called Fright Night which I think had the same horror host type vibes to it. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to bring back Fright Night, by the way, was hosted by Sinister Seymour.
I just saw that too.
But they wanted to bring back Mila Nurmi as Vampira, and I think she wanted to pass the torch, and she wanted somebody, I believe, by the name of Lola Falana to carry on. I don't know if it was as Vampira or as somebody else, but either way, Mila Nurmi was involved with it somehow, and that was who they wanted. Producers said no, so Nurmi said, well then, the heck with it, walked away. They held auditions, came up with their own character, and then we got Cassandra Peterson, who became Elvira. And then, of course, Mila Nurmi thought it was a ripoff of Vampira, but technically, because Vampira was a ripoff of Morticia Addams as far as the look went. Now, there's a little more substance because the looks were very similar, but yet they were also doing horror host type stuff. The concept of Elvira was a lot more Valley Girl, and her backstory was, I believe her dad was a warlock and her mom was a vampire or something.
Yeah.
So there was more to, like, give a lawsuit backstory to say, like, well, I mean, in the realm of horror, like, are we really ripping off anything? Because a witch is a witch, and, you know, Frankenstein's monster is Frankenstein's monster. So I don't know exactly how that court filing went out, but there were complications. We'll just say that.
It makes me wonder because, like, Vampira played it straight. There was, like, she was introducing a movie, very calm, cool, collect, even when she was doing some of the most ridiculous stuff. Where Elvira was, like, goth valley girl, and she's there making fun of it, being very sexualized about it, where Vampira really wasn't. She was kind of like you said, your typical looking vampire.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see like very similarities, but not at all. Like I guess the dress and the hourglass shape would be very similar, but not in the slightest.
I think using a similar looking character in that horror host environment was another big reason for a lawsuit. But when it's technically when you're ripping something off, that's why it's a ripoff. If they would have directly said Vampiro without Myra Nurmi's consent, then you would be in trouble because she owned that character. And at that time, Cassandra Peterson didn't own that character right away either. They said that she was getting paid peanuts really for that show and was helping out on set because it was such a low grade set. I mean, hell, they rented that couch throughout the whole series.
Wait, they rented a couch?
Yeah, in our I Love Elvira episode, we talked about it, that she
Forgot
said
about
she
that.
rented the couch, and I think the couch, like throughout that series, cost more than it did to get her, like throughout that original 80s run.
Dude, that's bad.
But the one way how Cassandra Peterson has stayed relevant is because she wound up owning the character at one point, where her negotiations for her quarterly contracts were, well, if you can't pay me more, can I have these rights? And they said, yeah, sure. And it would just keep happening like that until one day she found out that they had all the rights, and here she owned the character, and the studio was pissed off about it, but that's their negligence. And
And the funny thing is, she learned that from,
Pee Wee Herman.
yeah, let's say Paul Rubin.
Yeah.
I started to think of his real name. But
And you're not even good at names.
I know. And it's funny because Pee Wee Herman owns that character, so it makes it funny the fact that he and Elvira were friends, and the fact that he helped her understand it, like, yo, if you're not paying you enough, try this route. And it makes you wonder, like, was he getting paid peanuts too, just to get that character?
And they're still both really relevant.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you see it or not, I know Paul Rubin still owns that character and can do whatever the hell he wants with it. I mean,
he just did that Netflix movie, Joe Magalio. So.
and also, I think he was doing Broadway stuff or some other stand-up things here and there. So, he can do whatever he wants and make as much money as he can and negotiate deals with it. And I think it's the same way with her. I know she said that they do have a resurgence of Elvira shows. I think you can even find them on Netflix or other places where they actually do the it's like a revamp.
Yeah.
I forget when it came out. What, 2014 or something?
I think it's called 13 Nights of Elvira or something along those lines. Like, you can, I think, I know Amazon Prime has them where you can buy them. I'm trying to remember who actually is showing them. It might be Peacock.
Could be.
Something
well,
along.
then if that would make sense, then if because Peacock's NBC, I think.
Yeah.
So, and if she was originally NBC, they might have like struck a deal then with each other.
And then I know Shudder has the 40th anniversary, which is, I think, 4 movies, which was kind of nice. And it actually had her movie as the first movie. But her hosting was a very different than what a lot of the other ones were. Like, the other ones were like the jokes and pretty much just
slapstick gag.
She was like tongue in cheek, very sexualized about it. But it made it funny because, like, you're watching the movie, all of a sudden she'd pop up and just, like, make a smart-ass comment about something going on in the movie.
You actually liked watching her, and she appealed to men and women because the sexualization of her was like, yeah, we want to see more Elvira, and she could talk the talk, and then women could easily be like, oh, man, she's funny, and she's cool, and she looks good doing it. And then she was able to she got so popular that she was going to talk shows and hanging out with guys like Vincent Price and Robert Englund and whoever else was. I mean, that was also a really good time for horror. I mean, 70s were as well, but I think you also had that different generation yet, like our parents' that still kind of ran the 70s era, and it was easy for them to be afraid of things that they didn't quite understand. I mean, we obviously hear the stories about The Exorcist and how that frightened people like you wouldn't believe. And I mean, some people can easily watch that now and go, it's not really that scary, but it definitely like messes with your head because it's a demon.
Yeah.
And an ally of Satan. So it's like, whoa.
But you gotta think, that movie had to make such a big impact that even today, like, it's still talked about. They did the show that brought Reagan back as an adult, and it kind of was cool seeing it play out, like, even after all that time has happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I said, things make a big impact, even if I guess the general population doesn't want to believe it.
Yeah. I think that even if they don't believe it, they still get fascinated by the storytelling, as long as you have an open mind about it. I mean, some people, as we know when we talk about, they get so picky about, this is so Hollywood, this wouldn't really happen in this movie, and it's like, just shut up and enjoy the film, like, for fuck's sake. I mean, some people get way too nitpicky about stuff. Like, I know, being a Batman fan, I've heard it. Like, especially when they watch Batman 89, it's like, well, why didn't the fucking cop just shoot the Joker at the parade? And it's like, you know what? It's just a movie. Like, I get it, but holy hell, man, just relax and enjoy a fucking movie. It's a good guy versus a bad guy. You know, like, if you hear the story behind that movie and all the scripts and concepts and, like, what they were trying to do, it's like, yo, if that's the worst it got and they still put it on screen, holy hell, you know, that's compliments to the creators, because it turned out to be really fucking good.
Yeah.
Fuck. Anyway. So Elvira became a pop culture sensation. She had movies, and she's still going to this day. It's obviously been a 40-year career. We all still get excited to see, like, what she's going to do next. I know she said, Cassandra Peterson, I mean, personally, that she wouldn't mind passing the torch. But she gets paid mega bucks around the Halloween season to still be Elvira, so she's going to ride it out. But, I mean, what people don't realize is that she's 70 now.
Yeah.
And she has every right to her life and her privacy, but if she's still going to be able to do things like, I think she did Elvira in a Scooby-Doo cartoon movie.
2 of them now.
Okay.
She did a horror host in as a movie, and then she actually played herself in, I think it's the Halloween episode movie. And it was kind of cool. She was actually working along with the Scooby Gang. And I like, out of all the people that I was not expecting to play a huge part, was Elvira. I'm like, that was one of the major pulls for that movie, other than Matt Lillard, but...
But I'm happy to see that she's gone on and continued that character.
I think the biggest thing that I was actually in shock was the book. Not the finding out that she was a lesbian, just the fact that she actually put out a book. Now, it sounds fucking horrible, but I mean, like, you know how everybody, like, doesn't really, they like to keep their personal life
sure, private.
Kind of like, yeah, private. And she did that for years, and it was kind of like shocking now, all of a sudden, it just, here's the book, and I'm like, kind of took me back, like, holy crap, like, yeah, I always saw her as, like, a very private person, and it was cool, but, like, it just took me back. It kind of caught me off guard. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, not in a bad way, because
No.
I know we all talked about it behind the scenes, and we were just like, oh, hey, all right, cool.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to be that private for 17 years about it, that's even more impressive, really.
Yeah.
I mean, with social media and the way people hound them. I think it also just goes to show that while she's still good with pop culture, she still is able to maintain that, like, fame and private life, which, what's the secret? I think a lot of people wouldn't mind having something like that, unless it was just really complicated.
It might be, but she also seems like she's very humble, too, so
Oh, yeah.
that might also play a factor.
Yeah, no, I think Cassandra Peterson seems like a class act.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and, I mean, when I heard that, I was just like, hey, good for you. Like,
Yeah.
I have no issues with that at all. It was a little, like, oh, wow, but, I mean, I wasn't like, oh, shit, man.
I don't think...
I have no homophobia tendencies, so
No.
it didn't, I was like, whatever. You do you, girl.
Oh, my gosh.
And as you said, you mentioned earlier that Freddy Krueger was a horror host at one point,
Yeah.
writing on the Nightmare on Elm Street series, which was actually really surprising that they did something like that, because those movies were so popular, and they said that they were going to start this show that was going to be late night, and I forget exactly if they didn't get the time slot exactly that they thought they were going to have, but I think the show suffered because they wanted to do a lot more extreme things on the show, and they couldn't because the time slot wasn't what exactly they thought it was going to be. So
I mean,
then some things got heavily censored
Yeah.
because of it.
I
And
mean,
that was
also,
the late 80s.
It was cheesy. I'm sorry. It was cheesy.
You know, I've gone back and I looked at some of those old episodes, and yeah, they're bad, but I kind of want to rewatch the remaining series just to see the potential that they had, because they really did have a lot of potential with that show, and it just got all screwed up. And it was so sad, because Freddy was kind of like an Elvira in a way, where he could be entertaining and he told these jokes, and there were even some episodes where it was Freddy. It wasn't... Freddy's Nightmares was a concept episode where it was an hour long, and I think in between that hour they told one story, like a Twilight Zone, and then after that story was told, there would be another character that was involved somehow in that first part, and it would carry on into the second half. So you get this hour-long episode, but really they were like two separate stories.
Yeah.
Unless there was Freddy involved, and then somehow it would just be the like hour-long. Maybe he wouldn't be fully in the episode, but towards the end he probably would be more. And some of them were pretty neat because they gave you a little more Freddy without it being in the movie, added a little more lore to it. Obviously, the kills weren't anything to be impressed with because the special effects were TV. They were working for peanuts on that, and it was just a cash cow. Everybody who worked on it knew it. They said it, and sometimes they would just come up with crazy things to just say, like, hey, what could we do? Like, they filmed stuff they knew they couldn't put in the show, but they just did it anyway because they were like, oh, yeah, this woman's topless. Yeah, let's just, like, put the camera around and show her breast, and it's like, it won't be on TV, but we just recorded it anyway.
Let's see what we can get away with.
And for it to last at least 2 seasons or something, it was like, well, I'm surprised it lasted that long.
Yeah. But I guess the pull of Freddy Krueger made it bigger than what it was.
Probably. And then on top of it, because of Freddy's Nightmares, most of the people that were involved with that jumped ship to this new little subscription company called HBO. And they helped create this other new form of horror hosting called Tales from the Crypt.
Oh, that's awesome.
Most of the cast and crew, because they knew how to work for cheap, worked on Freddy's Nightmares, helped out with Tales from the Crypt, and then that went on to, 8 seasons or something crazy?
I feel like it changed hands, too, like, towards the middle. So it's like, I felt like, I remember a lot from the early seasons. I don't remember anything from the later seasons. Which is kind of weird, because all I remember was the opening, obviously the HBO opening, and then, they were able to get away with a lot more. And, I mean, the Crypt Keeper having a very distinct voice, like, the look, that was actually scary as a kid.
Was. I was freaked the fuck out from that guy.
Yeah.
Even though he never really showed anything about actually killing anybody, but it was almost like he got a sick thrill out of hearing these horrific stories and telling you through the old 1950s comic books, and it was ugh.
He was another one that was able to deliver a joke or a pun about a kill, and it kind of went over your head because his high pitched little.
Did he do that?
And then as now going back, I've watched a couple episodes because I think it was the 30th not too long ago, might even later than that, but. It was I was watching a couple, and the one that I remembered was the circus performer with the 9 lives. And I was like, as soon as I watched it, I'm like, I remember this. I remember a lot of this. And then, in fact, it was the guy from the Goonies and Sopranos. The heck's his name? The bald one.
Oh, Joey Pantoliano?
Yeah, I think that's how you say it.
Joey Pants.
Yeah. And that's what made it even funnier, because I'm like, oh, shit.
Michael Berryman was also in Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
And I believe Leah Thompson from Back to the Future, I think she was in Tales from the Crypt as well. I think she was kind of like in a Dorian Gray episode where she didn't want to age, and then at the very end, after she got what she wanted, part of her debt was to age or something like that.
Oh, wow.
It was Tales from the Crypt was a really... It was an interesting show. I want to go back and rewatch that stuff again because... I think there was a lot that I didn't get as a kid, but of course, because it was horror, and I'm just so fascinated at this supernatural and scary sort of stuff. I was just like, what's gonna happen next? And there was never a happy ending to any of this stuff.
I'm even trying to think have I seen a happy ending episode? I'm I don't even think so.
And even if there was always that camera pan or tilt somewhere where it was no, something bad's gonna happen. If you think it's happily ever after, no, it won't be.
And I mean, they even later on tried to make it into a cartoon show for kids. So they were
remember that, yeah.
They were trying to make that generational jump so that could continue on going through time.
And there were movies from Tales from the Crypt as well. Bordello of Blood and the other one.
Oh my gosh. I don't remember it was being bad.
Yeah, they were bad.
I think it was they were a little ambitious with the Crypt Keeper and trying to see if it could sustain an hour and a half long horror movie.
They were ridiculous. I think if it worked like a Creepshow movie, it would have been better.
Yeah.
But they totally. Well, in a lot of ways, Creepshow is kind of like pre-Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
It even starts with that animated comic book opening.
Maybe that's a lot of what helped it jump, because I know now Creepshow was now a show. They're doing the same thing with the Creep. So he's the one not really telling the story, but he's the one going through the comic books.
Okay. And Tales from the Crypt was originally a comic book as well.
Yeah.
So for them to utilize the comics and then say, I don't know for sure if what was actually in those comics was used in the show, or if they just had writers take influence from previous stories, or if they just were all original. But I know that the Crypt Keeper would open the comic books up, or it would be a book or something.
I remember a leather-bound book most of the time, so maybe it was the comics in it.
That could be.
It.
It's been years since I actually watched a whole episode, but I just remember them being a lot of fun, unique, and different, and I wouldn't mind revisiting them again, though.
It's trying to find out who owns the rights.
I'll just go on eBay and buy the DVDs at that point if it's too much of a pain in the ass. Fuck all that.
And Joe Bob just had his 40th earlier this year. He originally started as a columnist. Am I saying the word right?
A writer.
Yeah, a writer for a paper. And then they needed a movie critic. So that's how he went from John Bloom to Joe Bob.
Did he... Now, let me ask you, because I know you're a big Joe Bob fan. How exactly did he go from John Bloom to Joe Bob?
To be honest, like, he's had different stories, and it just seemed to be like he wanted that Southern hillbilly thing because he would actually do the drive-in as a movie reviewer. But he
just as a character?
Yeah. And that's how it started, was because he did it like that. And I think it was, what is this year? Yeah, 82 is when that started. And eventually he got the show later on. I think it was at the drive-in. I think Turner Classic Movies had it. Whatever that was.
It could be. I remember you saying that after WCW Nitro was when he would
do Monster Vision.
Yeah,
so that was the 90s.
And that was definitely a Turner channel because they had WCW. Hell, I remember Roddy Piper was on that show with him.
Yeah.
And obviously Roddy Piper was in They Live, classic horror film by John Carpenter. So, they were talking about that.
But it's kind of cool seeing him jump from being on paper and then doing it as a show. So, like, I think the character developed more over time as I started seeing what we see now as Joe Bob in Monster Vision, where at the drive-in, he was a little more straight-laced, where, like, he would have a little bit of a rant, but he was just talking about the movie. He would talk to the people. And I was like, I think I said it before in one of the earlier episodes that we were talking. Like, I remember the background was him standing in a projection booth. And it wasn't until, like, later on that I realized I watched it before when I was younger. So I remember being in Pennsylvania watching it. But I do definitely remember Monster Vision. But the difference between the two, he said the first movie would be a movie on a Turner Classic Movie. And the second one could be softcore porn. Because, nobody's watching at 2 a.m. So it didn't matter. So
he didn't give two fucks about it.
Because it's like, it's cable television. You can get away with a lot more.
Oh, absolutely you can.
And with that happening, so he had the two shows, and it was kind of cool, like, checking them both out. Now that they do have the revival, I guess it would be. And they started a Patreon, or actually Darcy the Mail Girl did, where she actually is trying to find all the older stuff and remaster it and then put it out so everyone can see it.
Oh, that's really cool.
She became pretty much the librarian for his old material. So, like, she usually posts, like, 2 or 3 episodes a week of what she was able to fix up. Sometimes she's not able to get the audio correct. So it's like she might even tell you, like, listen, I got this cleaned up, this is cleaned up, and then you might lose a little bit of audio she'll put the segment mark. And it's kind of cool seeing that. Like, she did post a lot of his, like, written material, so you can read that there. So she's doing a lot just for him.
That's really cool, though.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they have, like, a good working relationship. I mean, obviously she's not just on the show, but she's also active on social media, helping to promote the show. And she always speaks very highly of him. And they're even out together in meet and greets and stuff, and actually out at drive-ins and things like that. I mean, shit, they've been to Mahoning here in Pennsylvania numerous times already. I think that's great.
And they both love their fans, so it's like they're able, like when they meet them, they'll talk to them. It's like it's kind of cool. Like I met the first time, I was kind of like shocked when I talked to them. I was like stumbling over my words. It wasn't. Then the second time I was actually talking
back.
Yeah, so I was like, it's crazy, like meeting people for the first time, and then like you meet them again. It's like, all right, I feel like an asshole the first time. But I've said it like even before, like watching the stuff now and then watching, like going back and rewatching the old stuff. So she put out 2 DVDs for it's called Lost Drive-In, and it's pretty much like old episodes she was able to just get onto Blu-ray or whatever. And I've watched a couple of the episodes. That's how I started realizing I've seen the opening before. And then I think the first one they showed was for Little Shop of Horrors with Rick Moranis. And it's a Christmas episode, which I was laughing about because he's sitting there screaming at a bunch of kids out the window. And but I think more of the format now, with The Last Drive-In, you definitely see like him being more of a host, as in like having the guests. Like he did have the guests before, but it seems like a little more, not formal, but a little more comfortable. So because of it, I guess being the difference between a streaming and a
cable network,
so you're able to have a little more freedom in what you do with your character.
He might even know them a little bit more now too, because I mean, how many times has Felissa Rose said that she's been talking to him or been on that show? And so I think it's easier to just be more formal. And I mean, even Darcy was saying something about how she saw Kane Hodder at a convention walk by her and texted Joe Bob, and she showed the response, and he was acting like he's met him and known him for many years, and she's like, "You're a dork," because I think he called him the Canester or something, and like some of this stuff's new to her, but he's probably met and talked to these people so many times that it's more just like they're at the point where they're friends, not just, hey, I'm Joe Bob, thanks for coming on my show anymore.
Yeah. And it did seem like he had a really good relationship with Roger Corman. So even when he was a guest on the show, they were talking like they've been friends for years. I mean, like literally. And then I think he said the first time he met him was at, what they call it, the Lumberyard, where he used to do all the movies for the Corman movies. He said he was talking about how he went there to just see if he can get in to watch movies. And he looked over this pile of stuff, and there's like monsters from the movies just in a pile like it's trash. And he's sitting there going, Roger, you know what you have in there? But it's cool, like, seeing that. And then, like I said, it is cool seeing, like, the interactions with the fans. So, the fact that he is doing live shows. Like you said, went to the drive-in, did a live version of The Lost Drive-In. And then he does this comedy show for the Texans Save Hollywood or something like that.
How rednecks say?
Yeah, that's I'm thinking Texan because Texas.
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah, and it shows like you can see the two different sides. Like I've read his books, and he's a really good writer. And then you see the character. It's like they don't really. And that was one of the questions I asked him the second time I met him, because it's like I'm like, all right, I just finished reading both your books, and I was like, what do you like more, being Joe Bob or John Bloom? He's like, honestly, he goes, I actually prefer being John Bloom because I don't have to get changed. I can sit in my boxes all day and write. Plus he's, what, I think 69 or 70, so I could see it.
I couldn't believe how tall he was when I saw the pictures of you with him. I was like, holy fuck, he's huge.
Yeah, yeah. And very, very nice. Like, very polite. Awesome. So it's like, yeah.
I think he probably just gets a kick out of talking movies with people.
I mean,
hence his job. I mean, like we do.
Yeah. That is actually one guest I would love that just bullshit with.
Yeah, I'm sure he's got stories.
And it would be cool because, like you said, like we'd talk about movies and then seeing what his interactions were with people and then talking about movies with that.
Well, shit, that's what I got a kick more out of when we do the meet and greets at conventions. It's not just sometimes a specific movie that they're in that they're really known for, but just hearing their experiences and who they're meeting. And I mean, I'm sure they get the, oh man, you were so great, I loved you and this and that so much. And sometimes, like lately, especially with like my film background and having a sense of like, filmmaking, I can talk to people like Tom McLaughlin from Friday 6 and talk behind the scenes stuff, or say things like I did, like, who would you have cast as Jason's dad? Because that was originally what you guys were going to do before Frank Mancuso Jr. said, no, we want to make it look like Jason's still alive, even though you're killing him, but let's just like leave the option open for another sequel. And just talking film history, because Tom McLaughlin was another one of those guys who just, he said you have to, like, I was talking to him and he said, yeah, I'm the same way of talking movies. You practically have to pry me away from, like, okay, we gotta go, one of those things. And I'm like, I get it. Like, I had to take a look back and go, well, I don't want to hold up your line or anything, because we were just blah, 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 blah. Super cool guy, and I'm sure that's the kind of conversations that they look into as fun more.
Yeah.
Instead of just people saying, like, hey, you're so awesome, it's so cool to meet you, or I just want to add you to my collection. It's like, I genuinely want to meet them and hear their stories and have them tell me stuff. Like, one of the coolest stories and people to tell stories was Michael Berryman. Oh my God, my girlfriend and I, we could not believe the amazing shit that guy did with his life. And that's the kind of stuff that you just want to sit down with somebody and just listen. Just shut up and let them talk.
He's actually one person I do want to meet. So it's like, I would love just to...
I highly recommend it. And I recommend everybody from the cast of Friday the 13th Part 6. They were just like the sweetest, most incredible people. Not a cocky bone in their body, just very humble and just really cool, chill people to talk to. Jokes all over the place. Like, normal, they're normal.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, it was really cool. I can't talk highly enough about people that I've met. Definitely Michael Berryman, you should check out the cast of Friday the 13th Part 6, and Ernie Hudson. If there's 3 people or 3 groups that I recommend, it's who I just mentioned.
Yeah.
One other horror host that we forgot to talk about, that was a new revamped version of it, believe it or not, was a little show on Nickelodeon that we didn't mention.
I was actually going to get to that.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'll let you take it.
Oh, it was, Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I think in there they're called the Midnight Society. Actually, I think that's what it says here. But that wasn't our introduction as kids to a real kid version of, let's say, the Twilight Zone of horror hosting, because it was the kids around a campfire telling a story. So each story was pretty much just like kind of a fucked up.
Yeah, it definitely was. Sometimes that stuff on Nickelodeon got really grim. That shit was like, like, kids are allowed to watch this?
Yeah, even if you think about it, like, even if, like, bring up the next generation of horror fans was, like, the Tales from the Crypt cartoon, this, All Real Monsters, Scooby-Doo, and...
Goosebumps?
Those are... Goosebumps was actually one. If you look at let's say Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, those two shows, are very similar because they're telling a story each episode. And it could be kids narrating it, or it could be the story itself. But definitely, I would say Are You Afraid of the Dark is more of the horror host style than I would say Goosebumps is. Like,
oh yeah, Goosebumps was straight into the story when the Midnight Society was the group of kids that wanted to gather around and tell scary stories in the woods.
Plus, they throwing the, was it non-dairy creamer on the
the
fire, get that blue flame. The funny thing is, I just got one of those shirts for the show.
Oh, really?
But in even with the 90s, we had the boom of Mystery Science Theater. Yes, they started in, I think, 88 or 89, but they didn't really get big until the 90s. And then Joel Hodgins even admitted he geared that towards kids. So he's trying to do a puppet show and a horror host together so that he could actually have all ages do it. Which to me, I was like, I didn't really realize it. I just thought it was, jokes. But when he said that, and I'm like, it made sense. I go, there's another person trying to bring that next generation of horror hosts in, because now you're watching a group of people make fun of it. Because they all said that no matter what, you're watching a bad movie, your friends are going to make fun of it. You're going to make fun of it. Why not watch a group of people that have watched it a million times make the jokes with you?
Which we've done just for fun, like we just done it sitting in Jeff's living room.
Oh my gosh.
I think our most memorable one is Friday the 13th Part 8.
Dude, that boxing scene.
That alone. Oh man, we should have recorded that. we said some gold with that one.
And even then, like, we were sober, so it made
I know, right? We don't. Jeff and I, for anybody who knows this, we don't really drink.
I actually stopped drinking probably about shortly after I was 22 because I did have a problem. But even now, like, even if I do drink, it might be one or two because I know how to control myself.
Yeah, that's how I am. I mean, I don't mind being the DD. And if I go out somewhere, I usually get something strong like a Long Island iced tea and then just kick it. Because I know I can hammer them down, and I don't really like doing that unless I know I'm going to get home safe.
Yeah.
And hell, there were times Jeff and I would just kick back, smoke cigars, and now we both like really have cut back on the cigars as well.
I honestly don't even remember the last time we smoked. I think it was 3 Halloweens ago.
I was going to say, I think it was 2017 when we all got together for a Halloween party.
Yeah.
We were outside by a campfire.
Yeah. Best time to do it.
That's right. I was dressed as Hulk Hogan.
I think that's when I first wore that skeleton costume.
That's right.
I still have that. It's amazing.
I still have my Hogan one, too. And the boots.
As I'm looking through here for the 90s, I did not realize Gilbert Gottfried was another one.
What?
Yeah, I was like going to click on it, but but I'm like, just that voice. I'm like, really? I would think I would stop watching after Gilbert Gottfried.
Isn't this scary to you people? Oh gosh, I can't see that. I mean, don't get me wrong, Gilbert Gottfried's funny, but woo.
And then, so when the 2000s hit, you actually see, I go from a list of, let's say, 20 names down to maybe 7. So even in the early 2000s when the horror hosting was dying, even Elvira and Joe Bob weren't doing it now. And the one name that actually does stick out, so I'm guessing this is around the time that he did House of 1,000 Corpses. Rob Zombie did a horror night host.
Oh, no kidding.
And that's what I'm looking at. And then I also just recently saw that Neil Gaiman did one as well. I'm guessing it's for Universal. So the fact that they were still trying to keep it revived, but by bringing in, I guess, celebrities, would be... So Rob Zombie, kind of a given because he's a huge horror fan. I could see that being a really good run. I kind of actually want to go find it now.
Mm-hmm.
And then also with Neil Gaiman, he's the one who wrote a lot of like the horror comics, the more on the darker side books.
Isn't Sandman one of his more famous ones?
He also did American Gods, Good Omens. So it's like he knows what he's looking for.
Yeah.
He was actually in that documentary American Scary. I didn't know why he was in it until the end of the documentary.
Okay.
And he was talking about how all his entire life he wanted to rise out of a coffin, and that's what he did for the gig. He had a vampire assistant, and he was dressed normally, and he got the rise out of a coffin because she opened the coffin for him. So it was kind of cool seeing that. But even there, I think the only other name I see, is Svengoolie. He's still there. And you have one literally called Dr. Sarcophagus. I might actually start checking some of these out. And then back in that, there was really nothing in the 2000s. So even at that moment, everyone knew it was starting to decline. Even I know Mystery Science was kind of done in 98. So we had a good run there.
I think it was definitely not a full-time schedule sort of thing. I think it became very seasonal then, and it was kind of nostalgic to revive them during that time. Like, I remember AMC sometimes that they would play certain horror movies. Like Stan Winston, Stan Winston, the special effects designer for, like, he did, like, everything in the 80s. Yeah. Terminator, Predator, like, all sorts of, like, crazy, wild stuff. He was, like, known for mainly working with James Cameron. I believe he helped developed the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park. I mean, Stan Winston did everything. And he talked about how he was heavily influenced by characters like Frankenstein and Dracula, and I think he would sometimes host those movies and do commercial breaks and do some little trivia here and there on the AMC channel.
Okay.
And of course, it was just for specific movies, and either he was hired to talk about them or he actually liked talking about them because they influenced him.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, but it wasn't nothing full time. It was just, here's a seasonal thing, talk about it, and after Halloween's done, that's a wrap. It wasn't a 24/7 thing, or a year-round thing, I should say.
But I think also what made the major decline in it was everything went from being local to corporations buying it out, and it became more of a syndicated thing. So it's like a lot of these horror hosts were local people, like newsmen, narrators, stuff like that were doing it just for a side gig. And even at that point, so everything's getting bought up, there's no need for this local talent anymore. So like people are going to make more money by infomercials.
And the change in times with like the original slapstick comedy gags and the goofy labs and stuff like that was a thing of the past. It's more brought out as nostalgia now. I mean, Elvira just sat on a couch. But I think, like, if anything, sometimes you need a nice little break, and then it allows you to do other things and explore other avenues, especially as a creative person. And then they might come up with something different and be able to revive and give you a little more jazz to the concept. And I think we got, like, especially now, it's kind of resurging, but resurging more as an internet thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gotten, what are the names here? Count Gordeval.
Yeah, I just saw
Blair Bathory. Hellbound Video has a Hellbound Video store clerk for Deadflix. And of course, our friend and special guest, Lord Damien McDonovan.
Yeah.
He was heavily influenced by Cassandra Peterson's Elvira, and he's also got a thing for loving vampires and pirate lore, and he created this whole character that he called Lord Damien McDonovan. Now he's been going to conventions either as the character or with a booth and promoting a show, and he actually has a show on YouTube itself where he has his own sets. He comes up with other characters that are monsters and has his own little, not quite slapstick gags, but sometimes stories that really tell a narrative, like throughout the movie.
That's pretty cool.
It is really cool. I helped him out with one in 2015 where it was like a party at Castle Donovan, and it turns into this Scooby-Doo kind of adventure, and that was a lot of fun. That was actually a lot of fun to do, because he got to like create these other characters from friends that were either working at Dorney Park during the haunt time, so they were already in costumes, or he would do makeup and we come up with costumes for them, or people from the theater and borrow these costumes and props, and it was good times, and that was a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. Of course, in filmmaking, it's not always fun and laughs. There's challenges that you got to get over where it's set designs and things like that, but we had like the corny skeleton with the like moving him with a hanger and other things, and it just played into like the old nostalgia. I think there's even one part where his mouth's moving but the lips don't quite sync up, and it just made us laugh because it's like, well, it fits with the narrative of the old classic cliche, horror movies where that happens. So it's like, yeah, it's just keeping up with the nostalgia.
Yeah. And honestly, it adds to it.
It does.
And if you're going for, like you said, the cheesy little bit of, like, corny slapstick, definitely.
It was a lot of fun. It fit. It was appropriate. I mean, if there was one time where something like that could get away with it, got away with it, it was definitely in that. I mean, had we preferred it to work out perfectly without a problem? Yeah. But with that, it worked out just fine.
That's actually pretty cool, though. I know you and John did an episode without me because scheduling conflicts.
Yeah, yeah, we did the Mystery Science Theater sort of thing where we did the goofy commentary over Nosferatu with him.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we went into Castle Donovan and we're like, oh shit, a vampire, even though we know him.
I think it was the last time I saw him was when we went to the PA HorrorCon. And
yes,
it was a Lehigh. That's what Allentown.
Yep. That's where he's based out of, is Lehigh Valley at RCN, the local, again, local news network,
pretty cool,
or cable network channel, whatever you want. So he really is keeping up with the nostalgia of it, and it's really cool. And we try to support him everywhere we can, and he's got Instagram. I think he has Twitter. I don't know who the hell goes on Twitter anymore, but mainly you can find him on YouTube at Lord Damien McDonovan. And, Damien's Dreadfuls is the name of the show. And if you love horror hosts and what they do, check his show out.
Yeah. I mean, even we had with the revival again of horror hosts, like I said before, John Bloom, Joe Bob came back on Shudder. Mystery Science actually had 2 revivals within the past 5 years. So you had the Netflix run, which was 2 seasons, and now they actually have their own streaming service for just Mystery Science Theater, and their new season comes out in May.
Now, I know that there's this thing called Riff Tracks.
Yeah.
Is that by them, or is that them? Or how does that work?
That is the original Tom Servo and Crow with Mike Nelson from the second incarnation of Mystery Science. He's one of the more popular ones. Once Mystery Science disbanded, they still wanted to do it, so Riff Tracks became its own thing. And then Joel, the original creator of Mystery Science Theater, later on realized that they still had something, so he was like trying to get it to work, and then Netflix was the one who picked it up. I know the first season back, they did a backer thing where they literally made all their money to do 13 episodes, and then later they made everything and then sold it to Netflix. And then Netflix did one more season and it got canceled. Sorry. But it wasn't the greatest.
Okay.
Like, I watched it. It was because they originally came out on Thanksgiving. So every year they do a Thanksgiving marathon. It's called the Turkey Day Marathon. So they put that season out on Thanksgiving. It's 6 episodes. I burned through it. Because I was just like, I'm like, 6 episodes, whatever. If it was the 13, I probably would have been better. But no. And like the way it ended, it was bad. So like I could see why it got canceled.
Okay.
But I could see that they didn't want it anymore. So, and then I heard rumors that he was trying one last time to do one thing. I'm like, but if you guys end it the way you did, or is it going to be any good?
Yeah, we're going to get a Dexter revival part 2 where we think it's going to be a better ending, and no, not really.
But like I ended up backing it this time because like it's its own app. They have full creative control. They have their own thing. And I want to say mid-April, they actually put out the first episode, did a live event, and then the second episode was actually out last Friday. So watching it, I'm like, they started seeing everything kind of coming together. So I think the real season, after it's all done and edited, it comes out in May, which will be nice because like the first 2 episodes, like they even tell you like it's a rough cut, just be warned. They just wanted to show us what they're doing.
Okay.
And I thought that was cool because like everyone who paid into it to like, well, here.
Yeah. You better pay up at that point.
Yeah. And it was cool. Like cool seeing that they decided to do it their own thing. And I'm curious to see in the long run how far this is going to go, because once again, who wants to pay for another half?
Yeah, if you're gonna be. Yeah, I mean, that's like one of the worst things ever, by letting your fans down from having them back you and say, hey, we're going to give you something, we're going to have full creative control. Like that, hey, that sounds nice, but that could also be, it could be like a Rob Zombie movie. Like, even though I heard him say he had like, it was like psychological mind games with the Weinsteins when he did the first Halloween movie, but yet I still watch that and go, but this is a Rob Zombie movie to a T. I mean, excessive fucks and like weird sexual talk is like,
It makes me wonder how much he tried just to fuck with them.
Yeah, I know, right? It's almost like, well, you're fucking my movie up, so I'm just gonna do this.
Even was it now? Actually, I think it was last year. The guy who played Polka Dot Man in the Suicide Squad made a comic series called Count Crawley. It is a horror host who actually has to fight real monsters, and I thought that was kind of cool because like you're watching a horror host literally wreck her own life, and then kind of taking it, starting to realize the monsters in the movie are real. And I can't remember what his name is, but all I remember is like he played Polka Dot Man.
I know who you're talking about. He
What?
was in The Dark Knight, and he also did the voice of Calendar Man in the Long Halloween
Yeah.
animated Batman movie.
So it's kind of cool seeing that. Like, it's here, but like I said, it's more or less like, even in the documentary, they said that if you're a fan of horror hosts, you're going to pass it on to your kids, so you're going to pass the torch. People who normally don't watch horror hosts aren't going to really give two shits.
I don't want to say, like, how do I say this? I don't want to say I never got into them. I was just never, like, a big fan of them that made me absolutely glued. Like, what is this horror host going to do? Maybe except for Elvira.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, the bad movie in itself, I was like, I don't know if I want to watch this bad movie just for the horror host. Sometimes I like just watching the horror host clips, and I'm totally fine with that. Or if it's a movie that I've seen before, I don't feel like I have to watch the movie just to watch them. I like just watching what the hosts have to say. Because sometimes I feel like that's, like, especially if it's a movie I already know, I'd rather just hear what they have to say other than what they got. Now, something like Mystery Science Theater, where they're doing the commentary over it, you're getting something totally new with a bad movie, to make the experience even better.
Oh, yeah.
So that I definitely understand. And then you also get the hosting side parts where are entertaining as well. So, I mean, I think that worked out to a T. I don't say it's totally a waste because I think that's so bullshit. I think it's very nostalgic and very fun. At the end of the day, I do say it's a gimmick that just adds on to make an experience better. But I definitely do say that it's something that should never go away. Because I think it's a very cool concept. It can be very educational. It can be very entertaining in its own right. And it can keep you glued to a movie that maybe you didn't know. Or maybe there's a movie that you think is bad and it really isn't. And then, like, in between these talks, they can help you understand that.
It's true. Come on, I guess how's the word I'm looking for? Pretty much, I found movies out that I would have never watched normally. So, take for instance, Mystery Science Theater. I fell in love with their one episode. It's called Avalanche. The movie is straight trash.
I watched that with you because
that's probably the one out of, I think it's season 11 or 12 that I've watched the most, and I quote the most because it's so bad, and the stupid jokes that come up with it actually makes the movie. I think it's the best one of the season. The other one is, I think, the season after, the really bad one. The first episode is called it's Mac and Me, and even that one I felt is really funny because now going from the 80s and 90s doing the jokes just for the 80s and 90s, having current topics being talked about while they're doing it makes it even funnier because come on, they make references to Games of Thrones and stuff like that. So no shit.
I know you bought the Samurai Cop riff track.
Yeah, I had to because that movie is straight trash, and hearing them do riffing while the movie's playing is cool. But even it more or less reminded me of a live event because I've done 3 of the Mystery Science Theater ones, and it's cool seeing them on stage and then doing their segment, and they'll actually walk up behind the screen. Their silhouettes will be on the screen. Where with riff tracks, they're still on the stage doing it, and then on the DVD they'll actually have the movie playing, and then 3 squares of them bullshitting. So it's cool seeing them still doing it, and then the fact that they're trying to evolve and try new things. So the live shows I think are really cool. So Mystery Science Theater's doing it. I'm glad that Joe Bob's doing it, even if it's just like you said, a gimmick.
There's nothing wrong with it being a
No.
gimmick. I mean, it's just, and it's nostalgia now. I mean, you could probably make a movie about a horror host that was from the 1950s and make it a cool story. You can make a horror movie out of a horror host hosting horror movies, if you want, and then it would bring back this really cool nostalgia type thing to it. I think it's just another added layer to the genre of horror, and it's amazing that I think it works best with horror, or as like you said, Mystery Science Theater with bad movies.
I mean, the 13 Nights of Halloween of Elvira, they did Night of the Living Dead. I've seen that movie a million times, and her version is like, it's funny because like I said, she'll just pop in while the movie's playing and say something stupid and pop right back out like nothing happened. It was just like, or like she will do a voiceover too, and so like it makes it funny because it's like you don't expect it. All of a sudden, just like boop, here you go.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching the movie for the first time, or you want to be like, oh man, they're interrupting the movie, then you're not gonna enjoy it. I mean, I think her original stuff was based off of, commercial breaks, and now it's more like it pop up in the middle of the movie, and I mean, you have unlimited access in some way, shape, or form to watch Night of the Living Dead or something more with a classic, reputation to it. But if you're watching it for the first time, it's like, yeah, I don't recommend it. But if nobody's aware of the new revamped version of how she handles the things, then I could see why they would be a little frustrated. But at the same time, why would you watch something that's revamped if you didn't see it before in its originality where they are interrupting it? I mean, to me, that's just a sign of the times that they just want to like put their comedy in this sort of movie because it's like, cue the joke, like here's the punchline. When before it was literally straight up on cable TV.
And like you said, everything was based around the
commercials.
That's the same format that Lost Driving still uses. So he'll do his intro, play the movie, do a commercial break, do his stuff, and then back to the movie. So it's like it is still under that format. So they didn't have to change much. But even though it's a streaming service.
And even now, when you have some of either the streaming or if they're just straight onto a disc format, any sort of physical copy, they might do what Elvira does, where she just pops up in the middle of the movie and just like says something, as they're talking, and just overlays it with her voice. It's it's different, it's new, but if you're not familiar with the movie, well then I could see why you'd be upset, but it's also on you for not watching it originally and going, okay.
But like I said before, would it help you rewatch a movie that you've seen before that you thought was straight trash?
Oh, absolutely.
I was like, come on, my big one being Sleepaway Camp. That was a big one for me. Clearly.
I mean, like my favorite worst movie of all time, Samurai Cop, and I can watch that without a problem, and laugh my ass off because it's just that bad. But watching it knowing that there is some added layer of extra comedy now to it, I'm like, oh my god, yes, please, give me that. I think in a lot of ways, these review critics that we get on YouTube now are also kind of like a new version of these hosts. Because sometimes they interject their sense of humor to it, but they're still review critics. They're not actual hosts.
Yeah.
Like, some people really play into the political thing with it, and I just get turned off by it. Like we said earlier.
Yeah. So, for this episode, I did a poll on whether or not horror hosts are relevant. So, the funny thing is, 35 people looked at it. Only 6 people answered.
What?
But it was still funny because, like, I noticed a trend, which made sense. So, when I first posted it was at noon. By, let's say, 7 o'clock, there was nothing to it. I think it was, like, you and our good friend Jen Harding that did anything with it. And then around 10 p.m. is when all of a sudden I started seeing it shoot up. And I'm like, wait, what the fuck? And then I started noticing like the views were up and like everything like. So it fit with, like I said before, the later time frame.
Yep.
But that's what it made it funny because like even the fact that around 10 o'clock it was at the 87% that said yes, they're still relevant. And I was like, cool, but it was like I forgot to post the answer, so I
Oh,
forgot to
okay.
talk about it now. But I thought it was funny because like 35 people looked at it and didn't even answer yes or no. But I also follow one of Joe Bob's, I guess, fan pages. It's Monster Vision. I have no clue if it's actually affiliated, but they're actually the last one to answer, which I thought was funny.
It would have been funny if they said no.
Yeah. But it's cool seeing, like, yeah. So 87% of the people that answered actually said yes. So
I agree.
And it, like I said, it was cool going back and looking into this a little bit more, and just being a fan in general. When I discovered the other horror hosts that I've never even heard of, actually made me want to check some out. So like I saw one that's called Saturday Night Dead, and it's actually based out of Philly. And I actually want to check it out. And I wonder if it's on YouTube. I was going to check it out after the show. But they were the same thing. They did more of skits, and it was more tongue-in-cheek jokes and stuff like that. So I thought it was kind of a, not really bougie, kind of a gold-digging woman who inherits a mansion, and it's her and the butler going back and forth while this whole horror hosting thing's happening. I thought that was cool. I want to check a little bit more about Svengoolie and Ghoulardi. I saw a little bit with him because the second Lost Drive-In DVD actually was Joe Bob interviewing horror hosts, and most of those were on there. He did one with Elvira, which I thought was funny because they're back and forth, caught me off guard, and then Ghoulardi was another one. So it's cool, like checking out now. I guess the whole nostalgia thing, kind of going through that. What about you?
I've gone back and I checked out Elvira, especially when we were getting ready to do the I Love Elvira episode. And also, I just found her entertaining in general. I feel like she's actually a part of her childhood as far as Halloween goes. I still remember her being part of the Blockbuster video commercials for Halloween. And finding her original show was really hard at times. I remember it wasn't until, was it Shout Factory TV online actually had it?
Yeah.
I think it has her stuff on there, and that's when I started watching her original show. And I think Netflix or Vudu had the 13 Nights of Elvira or whatever it was, and I was watching that stuff on there.
It started just like going crazy for some reason.
I hate allergies. All right. Better to get that shit out anyway.
Yeah. I got two awkward interactions with the mics.
But besides Elvira, I would say I wouldn't mind going back and watching Tales from the Crypt again, as I said earlier. I think they seem like a lot of fun, and probably a lot of shit I missed as a kid that went way over my head, but I wouldn't mind checking them out, maybe making a Halloween theme out of them.
That'd be cool. I know they did try doing a revival for Twilight Zone too, with Jordan Peele.
Yeah, I heard it was very political though.
I saw most of the first. I saw all the first season. Didn't finish the second season. So.
Yeah, I think once some people said that they saw it and said, it was more political driven than story driven. I was like, all right then, bye.
Yeah.
I didn't even give it a chance.
I was just happy to see Twilight Zone. So.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like I said, I probably should check out. Never really had a thing for Svengoolie. Nothing personal with him. Actually, I actually enjoy watching our friend Lord Damien and his stuff because I know the effort that he puts into it, and he tries to like really put a lot of fun and nostalgia into it. And he does know like incredible people that work in theater, and he's been able to get things like an Audrey 2 puppet for his shows and the costumes that they put into it. It's fun and it's entertaining.
So that leads to my question: is it still relevant?
Absolutely.
So I feel that I think horror hosts actually now kind of help keep everyone's attention to the TV, because where before it wasn't like everyone is kind of glued to the phone. So with all the streaming and everything else with that, now you have the opportunity to watch it on your phone. You got it on your tablet, computer, TV, but they're still engaging the audience to kind of keep their attention.
I would say it's definitely a love or hate it kind of thing. I just feel like if there's somebody who says, I could just watch the movie and be totally fine with it, I don't need this stuff. But I think it's nice to just add a little bit of extra flavor if you want a little more, if you want to just get some more backstory or see what they bring, or if you want something with a little more comedy to something that's bad or interesting. Yeah, go for it. Or you could even create new characters like the guys from Mystery Science Theater with the puppets, or an Elvira, or like John Bloom as Joe Bob. Those are characters that they're doing. And then, like you said, it's also a release for other people where they don't have to be so straight-laced. They can actually break free a little bit with their creativity and put on theatrics and have some fun, because in a lot of ways, you know how they say it's more fun to play the bad guy? I think in some ways them being a little free and putting on makeup and being these other characters and hiding behind the makeup or the mask and stuff is a good way to release what they want to say or how they want to feel and just be the villain, so to say. Because let's face it, I mean, we don't really think of Elvira as a villain, but she's a horror character, which really in general is characterized as a villain.
Yeah.
The Crypt Keeper. He's not really a villain per se, but how he just supports the worst of the worst situations, and he lives in a crypt. He's a scary looking cat. He's a villain. Like most of these guys technically are like villains. Lord Damien McDonovan, he's a vampire. And it's just kind of become one of those, like a Batman villain. Like, hey, they're bad guys, they're bad, but you love them at times. Doesn't mean you should worship them.
No.
But we know their characters too, so I think their fun is being that outlandish, say all, do all, be whatever. And I think that's what's really cool. It's just another added layer of creativity, and it just may not be for everybody. Like I said, it's not exactly my thing, but do I think it's relevant? Absolutely. It's just that added layer that might capture somebody else's attention. It may be something I may not like, but the added layer might help me keep an interest, and then when they bring it up in the movie and say, this is where this happens in this following scene, and you go, oh crap, I did not realize that. Like, they might say like a Night of the Living Dead, when you see them feeding on a person, they're actually eating meat.
Yeah.
And then that part pops up and you're like, oh, so that's meat.
There's a lot about that movie too.
I know.
I'm hoping that, because I know Joe Bob and Darcy were talking about for the 100th episode trying to do that movie because he's never done it. So I'm hoping.
I know I do enjoy commentary, so that's why I do say that I find them relevant, and I think it's just that. Like, if some people just want to watch a movie, okay, I respect that. And then there are other people who take movies way too seriously, and I'm like, it always cracks me up when there are so many people who get nitpicky about a movie, but yet they love 80s slashers, and I'm like, really?
You see titties, you see someone get stabbed. That's all you need. Someone's getting murdered while being naked.
But yet they go, how comes nobody's stopping the Joker at a parade in Batman? And it's like, some people you just can't. Whatever.
I mean, clearly you can tell I don't take movies serious.
I think we're just at that age now where movies are taken too seriously is the thing, because you're going to get those nitpicky people, and no matter what, you're going to find them getting picky about something stupid. Always. Oh, it's just always going to happen. Like, you can't please everybody. And that's why, I mean, I've been vocal on social media where people try to say something where they're like, you're wrong about this, and then it turns out I'm actually right, and I shove it in their face, and it's like, there, now shut up. Do you have anything else to add to the horror host episode?
No, I think literally we're good. Like, we covered a lot. It's just like, I know we didn't give every host its own thing, but it's like we hit the main ones. We did mention a few. There's a couple more that I can't remember their names, but I just love their gimmick. But
I think the gimmick's gonna live on more than actually what they do.
Yeah.
You know, like Elvira's more, like, she's more popular for the gimmick, and when she says that she does a lot more during the Halloween season as that character, I'm like, cool, but I really can't tell you what all she does. I know she performs at, was it Knoxbury Farm? And like they changed the name to Not Scary or something.
Oh,
like,
really?
Yeah, like
that's pretty cool.
like they play into it during the Halloween season. I know she does live performances, as I said, as her. I think she does tours or red carpet premieres as the character, but I'm sure she'll find other things that I don't know about, but I mean, it's more of like that character and how she portrays it is more so that than her actual jokes. Like, I can't really tell you, besides from the movie, you know, like a joke that really stands out.
I mean, if we went back and rewatched it, we'd probably be like, oh, that's...
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I had the opportunity of meeting her. I wish I would have gotten a picture with her, but I think it was just the heat of the moment. I was so excited to meet her. And she is probably the sweetest woman I've ever met.
Hey.
Her and Barbara Crampton are probably...
Hey, I mean, as long as they're still alive, don't ever say that we won't ever get a second chance. I mean, I never met her yet, so...
I know.
maybe when, like, you, me, and John all go, we'll be like, hey, finally.
Yeah. And it's cool being able to meet some of the hosts and, like, talking with them and finding out... Like, I really want to meet at least Joel from Mystery Science. I think that'd be cool just to pick his brain. But it's cool seeing these people. I mean, even cool meeting, like, horror fans and also the horror icons, horror monsters, and seeing that they're all people, like, just like us, and that's the way they should be treated. Not like they don't need to be on a pedestal.
No,
they're just like us.
They're just actors that were in a movie. There's nothing that special about them. They might think they are if they get a huge head from what they do, but as far as I'm concerned, you're just another person with a talent, really.
Yeah. Like, I know when I was younger, I used to be almost starstruck and almost afraid to talk to these people. And it wasn't until I got older that's when I started realizing that you just talk to them like you've known them forever. And then I think the first time that I had that interaction with a actual horror actress was Felissa Rose being that open with us. And literally, like, I just met her that afternoon, and she talked to us like she's known us for 20 years.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. Yeah. Even we met her again then, and it was the same thing.
Yeah, so she's like a genuine, like, very nice person. Even when I met Barbara Crampton, she was very genuine and nice, and, like, once again, like, I've known her for 20 years. And it was cool, like, seeing these people and having that interaction. And, like, I feel like if everyone treated everyone like that, I probably a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, I know, right? That's how I felt with the people from Friday 6. You know, they were exactly the same way. Michael Berryman was the same way. I really only had one bad interaction with somebody, and I've told you that story.
Yeah. I've had awkward interactions. I've had so-so interactions. Nothing like really.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't treated like I was a piece of shit. I mean, to an extent, yeah, but at the same time, it was like, you know, I mean, it wasn't like he got in my face and was like, "You're gonna kick your ass." Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It didn't look like that guy was gonna do a whole lot of walking anyway, so much less come after me.
I guess on that note, we wrap this up.
Yeah. I can't add much more
No.
into this conversation, other than I enjoyed this. I enjoyed checking out the history. I enjoyed that the hosting was really based off of more horror stuff than anything, and then how it kind of blossomed from that, and the bad movies that became comedy. I think that was really cool. I definitely don't fault it. It's not one of my go-to things for sure, but I definitely do enjoy the guys like Joe Bob and Elvira, Mystery Science Theater, and like I said, I wouldn't mind going back and reliving and rewatching that stuff. Hell, like I said, I watched not Freddy's Dead. Ooh, that's a rough one. Yeah, close. Freddy's Nightmares, and I still haven't completed the whole series, but there were things that I saw that I said, man, there was so much potential here for things to be good. I think that's something that if you revived now and did it on a streaming service or YouTube or something, it would probably be better.
Yeah.
I think a little steady gig for Robert Englund, especially because it was only some snippets here and there. You could put him in the makeup and have a day or two or something and just have a plethora of stuff where... And it would be fitting for him as Freddy. He doesn't have to do anything other than just host, and you're getting somebody like a legend like him back as a character. And he can just be in that makeup for a certain amount of time, call it a day, and call it a season, and then he's got steady work, and we get more Freddy, and probably get his quips and jokes and other sorts of things. So I think that would be pretty wild, but hey, time will tell, and we'll see.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see how the future of this is going to withstand, what we're going to get, how many new ones we are going to get. So I guess only time will tell.
Time will definitely tell. I think even like Elvira was saying about passing the torch on to somebody, I think it's a character that should be, because it's not like something that you really think about rebooting like a Freddy or Michael and Jason, but there's only one Cassandra Peterson.
Oh, yeah.
Just like how there's only one Robert Englund. I mean, there's only one Bela Lugosi, but we got Gary Oldman, who was very good. We had Max Schreck, that was Count Orlok, and then we had Willem Dafoe play him in Shadow of the Vampire. It was totally different, but it was a reboot of sorts. I believe, actually, I had read that they are going to do another Nosferatu, and Willem Dafoe is going to be...
Really?
Max Schreck, yeah.
I'm going to watch it.
I'm going to watch it, and believe it or not, I think Anna Taylor-Joy might even be in it.
I'm already sold.
Yeah, I know, right?
I think Nick Cage is playing Dracula next, too.
Yeah, he is, in a movie called Renfield. I am thirsty.
Oh my gosh.
Renfield, you asshole. That'll be interesting.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
On that note, we shall sign off. This is Collin Peters.
And Jeff Manfred.
Thank you all once again for listening. Stay safe. Stay crazy.
Please, somebody help me.
Oh, yeah.